difficulty levels, right? For when you are setting the difficulty level of...
There are kind of 3 different axes you can set things along. You can shift the role you actually require. So I almost always left it as passable for things that are you trying to do stuff rather than targeting something to a person specifically. But you can shift that around if you want to. So this wall only requires a inferior to climb it rather than a passable.
Right, but that's just a direct target. You just got to do better than inferior, and that's that.
And then theoretically, I suppose, if you shift that around, then you shift what all the ones above it mean in terms of they go 1 up in terms of their...
Yeah.
Therefore, a passable result is actually a good or what. It gets really... Yeah. I didn't do it because it gets confusing. And or you can give people column shifts so they get better or worse.
Well,
rolling.
I have an actual technical question, which is that a distinction without a difference? Because could you just give all the NPCs stats in column shift and apply it and get the same results, or is there something different about?
I did try and think if I could work out a difference, and I wasn't sure that I could or not, but I wasn't confident that I had thought through all the possibilities.
Right.
So the table I was using most for the book was actually the one that comes after the role required, which defines all the results. Say awesome is 4 columns above the role required, and then says an awesome result is this.
Right.
You get this, and an inferior result is this, and you're really embarrassed.
Which creates much more of a bell curve situation for your possible narrations.
In terms of impact, what it's not clear about, or doesn't appear to say, as far as I can tell, is whether if you roll an awesome because you were already rolling against roll required or feeble, that still counts as an awesome in terms of getting a check mark and being able to roll to increase your skill.
It does. Okay. Right.
I think it's silent as to whether it does or not.
Yeah, I was actually sort of under the impression that you had to roll a clean awesome by your, by your ability in order to get the check mark. And
it's a little unclear about it.
Maybe it's just because that's fucking easier.
Well, it definitely doesn't let you say, I got a +2 column shift, so my great result turns into an awesome.
No, that doesn't count.
You definitely can't do that. Yeah. But it doesn't, I think, as far as I can tell, it doesn't say if we've shifted around the role required.
Right, if you legitimately get an awesome result through the 4 columns above feeble that I needed, then I get a check mark. My reading was no, but then again, my reading wasn't deep on that one.
Well, I think it just doesn't say.
Yeah.
And it's not clear whether it's defined that as an awesome result or the equivalent of rolling awesome if you have been rolling as passable.
No, I get what you're saying.
It's never going to be 100% clear. So
no, right.
Again, and that sort of thing was the sort of reason why I was never clear whether there is actually a big difference in column shifts, which are easy to do and think about, and roll required, which get much more murky and confusing once you start doing this anyway. So I didn't.
Yeah.
And there's a third thing, which is you can give people extra bonuses to their number before they look up on the table. But it hardly ever suggests doing that unless you give them magic items.
Right. That sounds almost as though some sort of legacy that slipped in there, because column shifts do that better.
Yes.
And as I recall, the text is pretty generous about column shifts. I was surprised when
the GM less so unless you remembered.
Yeah, well, that's fine. But the thing that I was thinking of was when I was playing and the player had a character I mentioned before who was a gypsy with an entomologian spirit guide. And the spirit guide was a real badass fighter, and the character just stunk. So the player was kind of terrified when he got in combat. But by the rules, when I finally looked them up, I was like, well, what do you do if you've got your buddy? How do I play the NPC buddy fighting at your side? And the book just says column shifts. You don't actually play the buddy by rolling for the buddy. I guess you could do that if they were completely on their own, but if they're fighting at your side, just give yourself a bunch of column shifts and be happy. It's like, really? That's a very blunt instrument. I mean, it's very helpful and easy, thank God, but it's a very blunt instrument for this game. The game is really interested in being so fine-grained in some ways and so straightforwardly, very effective, but again, very blunt, very broad in its solutions.
And again, column shifts are a thing which can easily tempt you into the dark side of, well, I really want to succeed at this. I will give them +4 column shifts to it.
Terribly abusable. If you find it's the old thing we've always been saying, which is, well, if you're going to do that, just call it an automatic success. You know, if you really want it to turn out this way or that way, just use the use the unclothed power, GM, and just say so, for God's sake.
But if you want to use them instead as I can see why they would get +2 column shifts here compared to earlier when I gave them +1 column shift.
Right.
You are trying to hold an awful lot of information in terms of, well, that compares to that roll earlier, and maybe we were rolling completely different stats and completely different skills, even, and not doing that often. So it's difficult to build that up as a picture of this is how difficult things are in this world, and therefore this is...
Difficulty modifiers have always been the devil. I've never been happy with a system which says, okay, grade the difficulty of the task with the gradations of your degree of success.
Right.
Result. Those are really hard. You'll find a lot of games with both of those in there. And I ultimately came to the conclusion that just do one or the other, not both.
Right.
You know, just make the target numbers higher or put negative modifiers on the roll, but don't do both. It's crazy.
I got a Herculean success on a Sisyphean task. What does that mean?
Yes, exactly. And I found in practice that in playing a lot of those games that I would jettison one side or the other of that equation.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the quirkiness and the whimsical quality are a plus, and in a lot of ways I'd really hate to see that go. And we I think we all tried to sort of play it up a little bit, but the tendency for that to sort of turn into the hijinks of the sillies. We didn't go that far, but you know that's always lurking. And
I mean, you have to make yourself not do it.
Yeah.
Right.
And then particularly if you do want to address any of the more grim or reasonably, psychological elements of play. I mean, how do you validate girls' emotional crisis at the same time as, the hilarity of, falling into this or that peril one after the other, or,
yes, that's good.
It's really, I'm not saying it's impossible, but it is kind of tough to imagine walking that line.
So, right. So is the problem we're having with the system itself just a problem of it tending to make it difficult to drill down on what's interesting or important because you keep getting static? Is that
right? I think that's part of it. And the idea is not that it's bad to look pathetic once in a while. And I have frequently pointed out that players are in a game where everybody's having a good time, feeling their characters are valid. Players will humiliate their own characters when they roll a fumble or whatever other moment affords them. It's actually, in my opinion, sort of one of the little tags for, hey, this game is going great. When somebody hoses their own character and everybody else sympathizes with the character rather than laughs at them, or laughs in an appreciative way.
Right.
And so I'm not saying that results like that are a bad thing. I almost, given the sort of generous nature of the text, the sort of fun that's inherent in the text, I get the idea that you're supposed to kind of go, yeah, man, that can happen. Bad day for me when you get a pathetic result. And everybody else is, that can happen. We're on your side. That shit goes down, and you caught it this time. And I kind of wouldn't want to lose that. What I guess it is true, though, is that if you are working on a thing and the dice bounce you just just how far do you? This is what you were talking about, Rod.
Yeah.
Actually, Ross was talking about this.
I
How
was going to
far do you
say
get
more.
bounced? You know what I mean?
Right.
How far do you
Yeah.
get bounced?
So, for example, if you said, I want to do X, and I know I'm going to need to roll 3 or 4 times with different things, probably to get there to justify it, say I'm going to talk to some contacts and then charm this character and then do this, you can almost guarantee partway through that you're going to get a terrible roll and it's going to throw you out and it will all come tumbling down around you.
Right.
And if you put in something like the skill challenges, you can say, well, you can fail 3 times as long as you succeed 5 times overall and you get what you want. Maybe that would.
There's also the Hero
Look towards
Wars
risk.
or the Hero Quest thing where you basically name an ability that's augmenting the ability you want. And the bonus is automatic. You just call it in. You say, I'm, talking to this guy, but I'm also I'm interrogating them. Not interrogate, because that's like a brutal thing. What's the anyway?
Like
I'm trying to say
empathy
I'm
or
bargaining.
listening.
Say I'm bargaining,
Yeah.
and I want to throw in a little charm. Well,
Right, okay.
in Hero Wars, you get a bonus that's based on your charm ability. You just rack it onto your bargain ability because bargaining is what you're doing, but you're a freaking charming person. And so it's still a single roll. And yet you have benefit. You don't have to risk that. You don't have to risk it twice. And so you basically the system just says, look, as long as we're talking about augments, you're good. There's no fortune in the augment process. And so I actually found that to be fairly. It allows you to do very nuanced and several step actions, and get the improved chance that you think you deserve, basically, without having to sort of tortuously, risk your way into that.
Right.
And it's a fairly, basically it's a lot like a column shift. You could basically say augment for, a column shift. I don't know. There'd be some little metric where you say, however good the thing is that you're using, that's how many column shifts you can get. You probably couldn't augment with anything that's less than passable, at all. So as long as something's passable, so you see what you want. You want your really good things augmenting your shitty things. That's how you want the system to work. So, and I think, the idea is if you're great at something, then you can't use something you're feeble at to make it better. But you can do the other way around. And that seems like a reasonable way. I mean, it means you'd be awfully charming about the way you do other stuff. And it means that a failure when you roll charming directly doesn't define your charming for good.
Right.
Which is sort of the feeling that we get with a couple of your or with my spying.
Yeah.
With, your sanity, we get the idea that I'm a shitty spy and you're, bonkers. And instead, if I had been able to augment stuff with charming or spy stuff all the time, I would have turned into a pretty good spy.
Right.
Even though I wasn't rolling those directly all the time. And you could have kept augmenting stuff with your sanity to stay nice and level-headed about everything. You would have come off as a real stable character. And then that one time when it goes against you, we say, oh shit, that can happen.
Okay.
We get that. We know you're stable, but you got hammered that time.
Yeah.
That can happen. The more I think about it, the more I think, and it fits the system. You don't have to change anything in the system. You just need some sort of rule for how many column shifts you get based on how good you are, and it could be very simple. I mean, just 1, 2, or 3 column shifts, for those 5 or for those few steps, and that could work out pretty well. And it'll go a long way for solidifying the characterization that you want. Legitimately too, because you're bargaining and you're being charming about it. You're some things are bullshit. I'm jumping over the fence. Oh, and I'm charming about it. Shut up. Okay. You know,
Right.
but but still, that's surprisingly easy to adjudicate. I've discovered.
Mhm.
When a player stretches it a little, we go, oh, all right. When a
Yeah.
player like ass pulls it, we're like, no. And
Right.
I mean, it's unanimous. There's a real
Yeah. Yeah.
nice aesthetic line for that in play that I've never seen anyone have problems with.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think the rule for Hero Wars Hero Quest these days, which is different from before, is that you could only augment one thing with one thing. So there was none of this piling
Mhm.
on 50 abilities.
Right. Right.
If you're going to augment, just like you got to bite the bullet and roll what you're supposed to roll, and you got to bite the bullet and decide what you're augmenting with, and if it makes sense, if your best one doesn't make sense, too bad, pick another one.
Right.
And again, I don't find that too hard to do. It's certainly no harder than some of the other decisions that the system has you make.
Oh, it's probably just codifying what I was kind of doing when I was awarding column shifts anyway, a lot of the time.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's reinforcing this is how we think of this character, and therefore they obviously get a column shift to do this thing because they're 6'6" tall and terrifying or whatever.
Yeah.